The sun was setting over New Haven, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Deho stood at the edge of the settlement, looking out at the wild forest beyond the fence. He was 14 years old, shorter than most boys his age, with quick eyes that noticed everything. The forest called to him every day, full of mysteries his sister Jiwan studied in her lab. New Haven was not like the cities back on Earth. It was small, just 2,000 people living in prefabricated buildings on an alien planet called Cathara 7. His parents worked in the agriculture domes, growing food in soil that humans had to teach how to grow Earth crops. Everyone worked hard here. Life was not easy, but it was theirs. Deho carried a collection bag over his shoulder. Jiwan needed samples from the blue moss that grew near the creek, about 2 kilometers outside the fence. She was studying how alien plants could help human crops grow better. The security officer, Hanul, always told him not to go out alone. But Hanul was busy today, and Jiwan needed those samples by morning. He slipped through the small maintenance gate, the one that did not have cameras watching. The forest was cooler than the settlement, and strange sounds filled the air. Birds that were not really birds called from the trees. Insects with 6 wings buzzed past his head. Everything here was alien, but after living here for 2 years, Deho had learned to move quietly and watch carefully. The creek was exactly where Jiwan said it would be. Blue moss covered the rocks like a glowing carpet. Deho knelt down and carefully scraped samples into his collection tubes. The water was clear and cold, running over smooth stones that sparkled in the fading light. He smiled. Jiwan would be happy. That was when he heard the sound. A low whimper like an animal in pain. Deho froze. Every rule his parents taught him said to run back to the settlement. But the sound came again, weaker this time. He could not ignore it. He found the creature in a small clearing. It was a thorn wolf, but young, maybe the size of a large dog. 6 legs, crystalline spines running down its back, and teeth that could tear through metal. This one had a deep cut on its side, bleeding dark blue blood. The young thorn wolf looked at Deho with eyes that showed fear and pain. Deho should have run. Thorn wolves were dangerous predators. But looking at this wounded juvenile, all he saw was a creature that needed help. Slowly he approached, making soft sounds to show he meant no harm. The thorn wolf watched him but did not attack. From his pack, Deho pulled out the first aid kit his mother made him carry. He had medicine spray for cuts. Moving very slowly, he showed the canister to the thorn wolf. Then, quick as he could, he sprayed the wound. The creature yelped and jumped back, but the medicine was working. The bleeding stopped. Deho left some of his water near the creature and backed away. The young thorn wolf sniffed the air, then limped to the water and drank. It looked at Deho one more time before disappearing into the forest. Deho let out a breath he did not know he was holding. What Deho did not know was that he was not alone. High in the trees, hidden by technology that bent light around them, 3 alien soldiers watched everything. They were Veskari, warriors from a species that had explored the galaxy for thousands of years. Their skin looked like dark armor. Their eyes glowed with a soft red light, and they stood over 2 meters tall. Commander Kethrin was the leader of this scout team. He watched the human boy through his visor, recording everything. The Veskari had been observing the human settlement for weeks, trying to understand these strange new creatures who came to the frontier worlds with such primitive technology. What Kethrin just witnessed confused him. The human was small, weak, with no natural weapons or armor. The juvenile thornwolf could have killed him easily. But the human did not run. More strange, the human helped the predator. This was not logical behavior. Prey did not help predators. One of his soldiers, a young warrior named Thyson, whispered through the comlink. The words translated to surprise and confusion. Kethrin agreed. In all his years exploring worlds, he had never seen such behavior. The Veskari were warriors. They understood strength, strategy, and the hunt. But this showed something different. This showed compassion toward an enemy. Kethrin made a decision. They would continue watching this human settlement. There was something about these creatures that did not match what the Veskari expected. Something that made them interesting. Deho returned to New Haven just as the last light faded from the sky. He climbed back through the maintenance gate and walked quickly to the small apartment he shared with his family. Jiwan was waiting, looking worried. She was 18, 4 years older than Deho, and she studied alien biology at the settlement's research station. When she saw him, relief crossed her face, followed quickly by anger. She demanded to know where he had been and why he took so long. Deho handed her the samples and told her about the creek. He did not mention the thorn wolf. Jiwon would only worry, and worse, she would tell their parents. His mother would never let him outside the fence again. That night, Deho lay in his bed looking out the window at the alien stars above. He thought about the young thorn wolf. He wondered if it would be okay. He wondered why he had helped it instead of running away. Maybe it was because, on this alien world so far from Earth, he understood what it felt like to be hurt and scared. In orbit above Cathara 7, Commander Kethrin sent his report to the Veskari homeworld. He included the footage of the human boy and the thorn wolf. He marked it as significant and requested permission to continue observation. Something told him these humans were more than they appeared. 3 days passed. Life in New Haven continued as normal. Deho went to school, helped his parents in the agriculture domes, and tried not to think about what he had done in the forest. But he found himself returning to the fence every evening, looking out at the trees wondering. On the third evening, Hanul found him there. The security officer was older, maybe 40, with scars on his face from his time in Earth's military. He stood next to Deho and looked out at the forest without saying anything for a long time. Finally, Hanul spoke. He said the forest was beautiful but dangerous. He said that humans were not the strongest creatures out there, so they had to be the smartest. Being smart meant knowing when to fight and when to run. Deho listened and nodded, but inside he wondered if sometimes being human meant something more than just being smart. High above in the Veskari scout ship, Kethrin received a message from the High Council. They had reviewed his report. They found the human boy's behavior interesting, but needed more evidence before making any conclusions. Kethrin was ordered to continue observation and report any other unusual behavior. Kethrin smiled, showing teeth that would terrify most species. He had a feeling he would not have to wait long. These humans seemed to find trouble naturally. He was right. In 3 more days, everything would change. The adult thorn wolf was coming, and when it arrived, the galaxy would witness what humans truly were capable of when they refused to run. The alarm screamed across New Haven at dawn. Deho jumped out of bed, his heart pounding. That sound meant only one thing: danger. Big danger. He ran to the window and saw people rushing toward the shelter points. His mother burst into his room, her face pale. She told him to grab his emergency bag and get to the central shelter. Now. She said it was a thorn wolf. An adult. It had broken through the eastern fence. Deho felt ice in his stomach. Adult thorn wolves were massive, 3 times the size of the juvenile he had helped. They hunted in packs and could tear through steel. One inside the settlement meant death. He grabbed his bag and followed his mother and Jiwon out of their apartment. The streets were chaos. Children crying, parents shouting. Security officers directing people toward safety. Hanel's voice boomed over the speakers, telling everyone to stay calm and move quickly to the shelters. Then Deho saw it. At the far end of the street, the thorn wolf appeared. It was enormous, its crystalline spines glowing in the morning light, its 6 legs moving with terrible grace. Its eyes scanned the fleeing humans like a hunter choosing prey. Blood dripped from its jaws. Someone had not made it to safety. The crowd panicked. People pushed and shoved. Deho got separated from his mother and sister in the surge of bodies. He tried to fight his way back to them, but the crowd was too strong. He was pushed sideways into a narrow alley between 2 buildings. The alley led away from the shelters toward the eastern edge of the settlement where the fence was broken. Deho tried to turn back, but the crowd blocked the entrance now. He had no choice. He ran down the alley, hoping to circle around and reach another shelter entrance. But when he emerged from the alley, he found himself at the eastern boundary. The fence here was twisted metal and broken poles. The forest was right there, dark and silent. And between Deho and safety, the thorn wolf stood. It had not seen him yet. It was looking the other way toward the sounds of the crowd. Deho's breath caught in his throat. He could run back into the alley. He could hide. He could wait for it to leave. But then the wind changed direction. The thorn wolf's head snapped around. It saw him. Those terrible eyes locked onto Deho, and he knew he was about to die. Every instinct screamed at him to run. But Deho had learned something from his years on the frontier. Running from a predator triggered its hunting instinct. Running meant death. His mind flashed back to the juvenile thorn wolf, to the training videos Hanul showed at school. to stories his father told about facing wild animals on Earth. So Daiho did something that felt completely wrong. He stopped moving. He stood up straight. He made himself as big as he could and raised his arms wide. Then he opened his mouth and screamed. Not a scream of fear, but a challenge. A roar that came from somewhere deep inside him, from all the generations of humans who had faced predators with nothing but courage. The thorn wolf stopped. Its head tilted slightly. This was not how prey acted. Prey ran, prey cowered. This small creature was challenging it. In the trees beyond the broken fence, Commander Kethren and his team watched in stunned silence. They had been tracking the thorn wolf, planning to intervene if it killed too many humans. But now they witnessed something that made no sense. The same human boy they had watched 3 days ago was facing an adult thorn wolf alone. Without weapons, without armor, with nothing but his voice and his stance, the thorn wolf growled a sound like thunder. It took a step toward Daiho, then another. Daiho stood his ground. His legs shook. His heart hammered so hard he thought it would break through his chest. But he did not move. He kept his arms wide, his eyes locked on the beast. There was a broken metal pole near Daiho's feet, part of the destroyed fence. In one quick motion he grabbed it. The movement made the thorn wolf pause again. Daiho held the pole like a spear, pointing it at the creature. His voice came out steady, strong, even though inside he was terrified. He told the beast to back off. He told it this was his home. The thorn wolf snarled and charged. Daiho had 1 second to react. As the massive creature lunged, he threw himself sideways and swung the metal pole with all his strength. It connected with the thorn wolf's shoulder with a sound like a bell ringing. The creature yelped and stumbled, more surprised than hurt. Daiho rolled to his feet. The thorn wolf circled him, wary now. It had never encountered prey that fought back like this. In its experience, small creatures ran or died quickly. This one was different. Dangerous in ways the thorn wolf did not understand. They circled each other. Daiho kept the pole between them, kept his voice loud and aggressive. He was running on pure adrenaline now. He could not think about being scared. He could only think about surviving the next second, and then the next. In his hidden position, Kethren could not look away. This human boy was not stronger than the thorn wolf. He was not faster.
He had no natural weapons.
But he had something the Viscari warrior recognized instantly: tactical thinking. The boy was not fighting with strength. He was fighting with his mind. Every move was calculated. Every sound was meant to confuse the predator. This was warrior behavior. The thorn wolf charged again. Daiho dodged, but this time his foot caught on debris. He fell hard, the pole flying from his hands. The thorn wolf was on him in an instant, its massive body pinning him to the ground, its jaws opening wide. Daiho saw death coming. He thought of his mother, his father, Juwan. He thought that at least he had tried. At least he had not run. The blast of a plasma rifle lit up the morning. The thorn wolf screamed and jumped backward, a smoking wound on its side. Hanul stood at the alley entrance, his rifle aimed, his face a mask of fury and determination. He fired again. And again. The thorn wolf decided this was not worth it. It turned and fled through the broken fence back into the forest. Hanul ran to Daiho and pulled him to his feet. The security officer was shaking, and not from exertion. He grabbed Daiho's shoulders and demanded to know what he was thinking. Why did he not run? Why did he face that thing alone? Daiho could not answer. His legs gave out. Hanul caught him and held him up. Around them, other security officers arrived, checking the area, securing the broken fence. Someone wrapped a blanket around Daiho's shoulders. Someone else radioed that the boy was safe. His mother and Jiwan came running. They grabbed him, crying, checking him for injuries. He had scratches and bruises, but nothing serious. The thorn wolf had not touched him. Hanul had arrived just in time. As they led him away toward the medical center, Daiho looked back at the forest. For just a moment, he thought he saw something in the trees. A flash of red light. Eyes watching. But when he blinked, it was gone. In their hidden position, Kethren lowered his visor. He had recorded everything. His team was silent, processing what they had witnessed. A human child facing an adult thorn wolf alone had not only survived but had fought with tactical intelligence that impressed even these veteran warriors. Kethren knew what he had to do. This footage had to reach the High Council immediately. The Viscari had underestimated humans. These small, weak creatures possessed something far more dangerous than strength. They possessed the refusal to surrender. That night, as Daiho lay in the medical center with his family around him, he did not know that his actions had been witnessed. He did not know that footage of his stand against the Thornwolf was already traveling across the stars. He did not know that the galaxy was about to notice humanity in a way it never had before. On Veskara Prime, the homeworld of the Veskari people, the High Council gathered in their ancient chamber. The room was carved from a single piece of black stone, its walls covered in the names of warriors who had died with honor over 10,000 years. Red light filtered through crystal windows, casting everything in the color of blood. Commander Kethrin stood in the center of the chamber, his armor polished, his head held high. Around him sat the 13 members of the High Council. These were the oldest and wisest warriors of the Veskari. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had fought wars across 100 worlds. Nothing surprised them anymore. Until today, Elder Thyra, the oldest member of the council, leaned forward in her seat. She was ancient, her armor-like skin marked with scars from countless battles. Her eyes, still bright despite her age, studied the holographic display floating above the chamber floor. It showed Daiho facing the Thornwolf. The council watched in silence as the human boy stood his ground. They watched as he made himself bigger, as he challenged the predator with nothing but his voice. They watched as he grabbed the metal pole and fought, calculating every move despite his obvious terror. They watched until Hanul arrived and drove the beast away. When the recording ended, the chamber stayed silent. Finally, War Master Vorik spoke. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. He said it was interesting, but perhaps the human child simply panicked. Fear sometimes made creatures act strangely. It did not mean the species was special. Kethrin disagreed, respectfully but firmly. He explained that he had watched humans for weeks. This was not the first unusual behavior. 3 days earlier, the same boy had helped a wounded juvenile Thornwolf instead of running. The boy showed pattern of behavior that indicated conscious choice, not panic. Another council member, a female warrior named Thyson, asked about human strength. The footage showed the boy was small, weak. The Thornwolf could have killed him in seconds. How could such fragile creatures survive on dangerous frontier worlds? Kethrin pulled up more data. He showed images of human settlements on a dozen worlds. Worlds with hostile climates, dangerous predators, and limited resources. Humans were there anyway, building, surviving, growing. He explained that humans did not rely on physical strength. They used tools, teamwork, and something else, something harder to measure. They simply refused to give up. Elder Thyra stood up slowly. When she spoke, everyone listened. She said that in her 300 years of life, she had seen many species come and go. Most fell into two categories: the strong who dominated through force and the weak who survived through hiding or submission. Humans fit neither category. They were weak but did not hide. They lacked natural weapons but still fought. This was unusual. This deserved further study. War Master Vorik crossed his massive arms. He argued that one brave child did not represent an entire species. Perhaps this Daiho was an exception. Perhaps most humans would have run. The council could not make decisions about a species based on one individual. Elder Thyra smiled, showing teeth designed for tearing flesh. She agreed with Vorik, which seemed to surprise him. She said they needed more information. Therefore, she proposed they make direct contact with the humans, send a diplomatic mission to this settlement called New Haven, study them properly, and most importantly, speak with this boy who faced the Thornwolf. The council voted. It was not unanimous, but the majority agreed. Kethrin was ordered to return to Cathera 7, this time openly, make contact with the human settlement, request permission to study their culture, and bring the boy called Daiho to meet with Veskari leaders if he was willing. Kethrin bowed deeply. This was a great honor and a great responsibility. As he left the council chamber, he felt both excited and nervous. The Veskari had made contact with many species over the centuries, but something told him humans would be different. Back on Cathera 7, Daiho was trying to return to normal life. 3 days had passed since the Thornwolf attack. The settlement had repaired the fence and added more security. Life went on. But everything felt different now. People stared at him. Some called him brave. Some called him stupid. His parents were proud but also terrified. They made him promise never to do anything like that again. Jiwan watched him with worried eyes, like she was afraid he would disappear if she looked away. Hanul was different. The security officer looked at Deho with something like respect. He started teaching Deho proper combat techniques during the evening training sessions. He said if Deho was going to fight dangerous creatures, he might as well learn to do it right. But Deho had nightmares. Every night he dreamed of the Thornwolf's jaws closing around him. He dreamed of not being fast enough, strong enough. He woke up sweating, his heart racing. During the day he could pretend to be brave. At night, alone in the dark, he was just a scared kid who almost died. On the fourth morning after the attack, alarms sounded again. But these were different alarms, not danger warnings. These were the first contact alarms. Something was coming from space. Deho ran outside with everyone else. In the sky, something huge appeared. A ship, bigger than anything humans had built. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, black metal that seemed to drink the light. With parts that glowed red like hot coals, it descended slowly, deliberately, until it hovered above the settlement's main square. The settlement governor, a man named Minho, was already in the square with every security officer New Haven had. Their weapons were ready but not aimed up. Nobody wanted to start a war with aliens who had ships like that. A platform descended from the ship. On it stood three figures that made the crowd gasp. They were huge, over 2 meters tall, with bodies that looked like they were carved from dark stone. Their eyes glowed red. They wore armor that seemed to be part of their bodies. They looked like nightmares come to life, but they moved slowly, carefully. Their body language said they came in peace. When the platform touched the ground, the lead figure stepped forward. A device on its chest crackled, then spoke in perfect English. Commander Kethrin introduced himself and his people. He said the Veskari came in peace and friendship. They had observed the human settlement and wished to establish diplomatic relations. He said they came with respect and requests, not demands or threats. Governor Minho stepped forward, trying to look brave even though his hands shook. He welcomed the Veskari to New Haven. He asked what they wanted. Kethrin's glowing eyes scanned the crowd. Then they stopped, focusing on one person. On Deho, the commander spoke again. He said the Veskari had witnessed an act of great courage. They had seen a young human face a dangerous predator without running. They wanted to understand this behavior. They wanted to speak with the one called Deho. Every eye in the square turned to look at Deho. His mother grabbed his arm. Jiwan moved in front of him protectively. But Deho felt something strange. Not fear, curiosity. These aliens had come across the stars because of what he did, because he did not run. Slowly, Deho stepped forward. His mother called his name, but he kept walking. He stopped a few meters from Kethrin. Up close, the Veskari warrior was even more intimidating. But Deho raised his head and met those glowing red eyes. Kethrin looked down at the human boy. So small, so fragile, yet standing straight, showing no fear. The commander felt something he had not felt in years. Genuine interest. He extended his hand, a human gesture he had learned. Deho hesitated only a moment before taking it. Two species meeting for the first time. One that had explored the galaxy for thousands of years. One that had barely left its homeworld. But in that moment, as they shook hands, something changed. The Veskari no longer saw humans as weak newcomers. And humans no longer saw aliens as simply threats. They saw potential. They saw the beginning of something new. The meeting room in New Haven's administration building had never felt so small. Around the table sat Governor Minho, Security Officer Hanul, and Daiho with his parents and sister. Across from them sat Commander Kethrin and two other Veskari. One was a female warrior named Lyris, who Kethrin introduced as a cultural ambassador. The other was a guard who stood silently by the door. Deho tried not to stare, but it was hard. The Veskari were amazing to look at. Their skin was not really armor, but it was thick and strong like stone. Their eyes glowed softly, changing brightness when they talked. They moved with careful grace, always aware of their strength in a room full of much smaller, weaker beings. Lyris spoke first. Her voice was gentler than Kethrin's, but still powerful. She explained that the Veskari had been watching the human settlement for several weeks. They meant no harm. They were simply curious about these new creatures on the frontier worlds. Then they witnessed something extraordinary. The boy facing the Thornwolf, Governor Minho, asked why that interested them so much. Surely they had seen courage before. They were warriors themselves, Kethrin answered. He said the Veskari understood courage, but what they saw was different. The Veskari were born strong. They evolved as predators at the top of their food chain. Courage for them meant facing worthy opponents. But humans were weak, soft, small. Yet they colonized dangerous worlds anyway. They faced predators that could kill them easily, and they did not run. This was not just courage. This was something deeper. Deho's mother held his hand tightly under the table. She asked what the Veskari wanted from her son. Lyris smiled, a surprisingly warm expression on her alien face. She said they wanted to understand. The Veskari High Council had extended an invitation. They wanted Daiho to visit their home world, to participate in a ceremony called the Trial of Echoes. It was a traditional test where young Veskari proved their warrior spirit. No alien had ever been invited before. The room exploded in protest. Daiho's father said absolutely not. His mother refused to even consider it. Ji-won demanded to know if it was dangerous. Governor Minho asked what would happen if Daiho failed this trial. Kethrin raised his hand and somehow everyone quieted down. He explained that the trial was challenging but not meant to harm participants. It tested courage, wisdom, and honor. Humans were physically weaker than Veskari, so Daiho would face modified challenges appropriate to his abilities. If he chose not to accept, the Veskari would understand and respect his decision. There would be no shame in refusing. But if he accepted and completed the trial, Daiho would earn a place of honor among the Veskari. More than that, his success would change how the galaxy saw humanity. Other species would learn that humans, despite their physical limitations, possessed true warrior spirit. For the first time, Daiho spoke. His voice was quiet but steady.
He asked if this would help humanity.
Would it make other aliens treat humans with more respect? Lyris answered honestly. She said yes. The galaxy judged species harshly. Humans were seen as weak, too fragile for the harsh realities of space. If a human could pass the trial of echoes, it would force other species to reconsider their assumptions. It could open doors for humanity that were currently closed. The meeting lasted hours. Daiho's parents argued against it. Governor Minho worried about the political implications. Hanul asked detailed questions about safety and what the trial involved. The Veskari answered every question patiently. Finally, they agreed to think about it. The Veskari would stay in orbit for 3 days. Daiho and his family could discuss it and make their decision. Kethrin and Lyris returned to their ship, leaving behind communication devices so the humans could reach them if needed. That night, Daiho's family sat in their small apartment. His father paced back and forth. His mother cried quietly. Ji-won sat next to Daiho holding his hand. She asked him what he wanted to do. Daiho thought about his life. He was 14. He had never been special at anything. He was not the smartest student. He was not the strongest or the fastest. He was just a regular kid who happened to freeze when he should have run and somehow survived. But now he had a chance to do something important. Something that could help not just New Haven but all of humanity. He told his family he wanted to go. His mother immediately said no. But his father stopped pacing and looked at him. His father asked why. Daiho explained that humans left Earth to explore space because they refused to stay in one place. His parents came to Kethira 7 because they wanted to build something new, even though it was dangerous. Refusing to back down was what made them human. He was just doing what his parents taught him. Ji-won said if he went, she was going too. Someone needed to watch his back. Their mother protested, but Ji-won was 18 and legally an adult. She could make her own choices. She pointed out that this was a chance to study an alien culture from the inside. As a xenobiologist, how could she refuse? The argument continued for 2 more days. The whole settlement was talking about it. Some people thought Daiho was brave. Others thought he was foolish. Governor Minho called a town meeting to discuss whether the settlement should even allow this. It could create problems if something went wrong. But Hanul spoke at the meeting. He said that humans did not get to the frontier worlds by playing it safe. They got there by taking risks. If the Veskari wanted to honor a human boy, if they wanted to show the galaxy that humans were worthy of respect, then New Haven should be proud. They should support Daiho, not hold him back. The settlement voted. The majority agreed. Daiho could go with conditions. Ji-won would accompany him. The Veskari would provide regular communication so his family could check on him, and if anything seemed wrong, the Veskari would bring him home immediately. On the 3rd day, Daiho and Ji-won stood in the main square with their parents. They each had a small bag of belongings. Their mother would not stop crying. Their father kept giving Daiho advice about being careful and thinking before acting. Jiwon stood tall and confident, but Daiho could see she was scared too. The Veskari ship descended. The platform lowered. Catherine and Lyris waited for them, along with several other Veskari who would serve as their guides and teachers during the journey. The trip to Veskara Prime would take 2 weeks. As Daiho hugged his mother one last time, she whispered in his ear. She told him to be brave, but also to be smart. Courage without wisdom was just foolishness. He promised her he would remember that. The platform rose up into the ship. Daiho looked down at New Haven, getting smaller and smaller. He saw his parents waving. He saw the whole settlement gathered to watch. He saw the only home he had known for the past 2 years. Then the doors closed and everything changed. He was inside an alien ship, surrounded by warriors from another world. Jiwon grabbed his hand and squeezed. They were in this together. Lyris approached them with a gentle smile. She welcomed them aboard and said she would show them to their quarters. As they walked through the corridors of the ship, Daiho saw wonders he could not have imagined. Technology that seemed like magic. Other Veskari going about their duties, all stopping to stare at the 2 humans with curiosity. Their room was large and comfortable, designed to accommodate their smaller size. There were beds, a bathroom, a study area, and a large window looking out into space. As Cathera 7 fell away below them, Daiho felt the ship accelerate. They were leaving the only solar system humans had ever colonized. They were going deeper into space than any human had gone before. Jiwon sat on her bed and let out a long breath. She looked at her little brother and shook her head with a small smile. She said their mother was going to kill them when they got back. If they got back. Daiho laughed nervously. He looked out the window at the stars rushing past. 2 weeks until they reached Veskara Prime. 2 weeks to prepare for a trial that no human had ever faced. He wondered if he had made the right choice. But it was too late to turn back now. All he could do was move forward and hope that the courage that saved him from the Thornwolf would be enough to see him through whatever came next. The 2 weeks aboard the Veskari ship changed everything Daiho thought he knew about the universe. Every day brought new wonders and new lessons. Lyris was patient, teaching him and Jiwon about Veskari culture, history, and the complex web of species that filled the galaxy. The Veskari had explored space for over 3,000 years. They had seen empires rise and crumble. They had fought wars and made peace. They valued honor above all else, but their concept of honor was different from what Daiho expected. It was not about winning or being the strongest. It was about facing challenges without surrender, treating worthy opponents with respect, and knowing when mercy was more powerful than victory. Every morning, Daiho trained with young Veskari warriors who were also preparing for the trial of echoes. At first, they looked at him with curiosity and doubt. He was so small compared to them, so weak. But Daiho surprised them. What he lacked in strength, he made up for in speed and unpredictability. The Veskari were powerful, but their movements followed patterns. Daiho learned to use that against them. One young Veskari named Kiran became particularly interested in him. Kiran was considered one of the best warriors of his generation, strong and skilled, but also proud. He challenged Daiho to sparring matches daily, always winning but never easily. After each match, Kiran would ask questions. How did humans survive being so weak? Why did they not fear creatures stronger than themselves? Daiho explained that humans had always been surrounded by stronger predators. Back on Earth, their ancestors faced animals with claws, fangs, and venom. Humans had none of those natural weapons, but they had brains. They learned to make tools, to work together, to never give up even when the odds seemed impossible. Being weak taught them to be clever. Kiran found this fascinating. The Veskari had always been strong. They never had to think like prey. This gave them power, but also made their tactics straightforward. Watching Daiho move, seeing how he thought 3 steps ahead because he had to, opened Kiran's eyes to a different kind of strength. Jiwon spent her time with Veskari scholars, learning about alien biology and culture. She filled notebooks with observations, excited about the research opportunities. But she also watched over Daiho, making sure he was eating enough, resting enough, not pushing himself too hard. She was his sister first, scientist second. Finally, they arrived at Veskara Prime. When Daiho saw the planet through the ship's windows, his breath caught. It was beautiful and terrifying. Red mountains reached toward a purple sky. Cities of black stone spread across the landscape. connected by bridges that seemed to defy gravity. This was a world built by warriors who had conquered their own planet thousands of years ago. The ship landed in the capital city. As Deho and Jiwon descended the platform, they saw thousands of Viscari gathered to watch. News of the human boy who would attempt the trial had spread across the planet. Some looked curious. Some looked skeptical. All looked intimidating. Elder Thyra herself greeted them. She was ancient and powerful, her presence commanding instant respect. She welcomed Daiho and told him that tomorrow the trial would begin. He would compete alongside 12 young Viscari. The trial consisted of 3 challenges. Each tested different aspects of warrior spirit. He needed to pass all 3 to earn honor. That night, Daiho could not sleep. He lay in the guest quarters provided by the Viscari, staring at the ceiling. Jiwon was in the next room. Kiran had wished him luck that evening, which surprised Daiho. The proud warrior actually seemed to want him to succeed. That helped, but Daiho was still terrified. What if he failed? What if he embarrassed not just himself but all of humanity? Morning came too quickly. Daiho dressed in the simple training clothes the Viscari provided. Jiwon hugged him tightly and told him she believed in him. Then guards escorted him to the ancient arena where the trial would take place. The arena was carved into the side of a mountain. Thousands of Viscari filled the seats, their glowing eyes like red stars in the shadows. Daiho walked out onto the arena floor with the 12 Viscari participants. He felt tiny next to them. The crowd murmured, seeing the small human. Among the warriors, Elder Thyra stood in the center and announced the beginning of the trial. The first challenge was the Chamber of Fear. Each participant would enter a sealed room where they would face projections of their deepest fears. They could not fight these projections. They could only endure them and push forward through the chamber to the exit. Those who broke down or retreated would be marked as having failed. Chiron went first. He emerged 10 minutes later, breathing hard but successful. Others followed. Some passed quickly. Some took longer. One young Viscari came out shaking and could not continue. The crowd respected his attempt but marked him as failed. Then it was Daiho's turn. He entered the chamber. The door sealed behind him. For a moment everything was dark and quiet. Then the projections began. He saw his parents dying. He saw New Haven burning. He saw Jiwon screaming for help while he stood frozen, unable to move. He saw the Thornwolf again, but this time it did not stop. It tore him apart while he watched, helpless. The projections were not real, but they felt real. His mind knew they were holograms. His heart did not care. Daiho wanted to curl up and hide. He wanted to close his eyes and wait for it to end. But that was failure. The exit was ahead through the nightmares. The only way out was through. He thought about facing the real Thornwolf. That had been terrifying too. But he had not let terror stop him. He had acted anyway. Fear was just a feeling. It did not have to control his actions. He could be afraid and still move forward. Daiho walked through his nightmares. Each step was hard. Each vision made him want to scream. But he kept walking. When he finally reached the exit and stumbled out into the light, the crowd was silent. Then they roared approval. A human had passed the first challenge and faster than half the Viscari participants. The second challenge was the labyrinth of choices. It was a massive maze filled with puzzles that had to be solved under time pressure. Wrong answers triggered traps. Participants had to find their way through using intelligence and quick thinking. This challenge suited Daiho better. The Viscari were strong and brave, but the maze was designed to test problem-solving. Daiho's human brain, evolved for pattern recognition and abstract thinking, gave him an advantage. He spotted connections the Viscari missed. He found shortcuts through passages too small for them to use. When Daiho emerged from the labyrinth first, finishing ahead of even Chiron, the crowd erupted in shocked cheers. Elder Thyra watched with an expression that might have been a smile. This human was full of surprises. The third and final challenge was the mercy fight. Participants were paired randomly to fight in non-lethal combat. But victory did not come from defeating your opponent. It came from showing restraint and honor. When you had your opponent beaten, you had to choose mercy over humiliation. The crowd judged whether you showed true warrior spirit or just brutality. Daiho's opponent was chosen by random draw. His heart sank when he saw who it was, Kiran, the strongest warrior in the group. The crowd buzzed with excitement. This would be interesting. The fight began. Chiron was faster and stronger, but he did not attack with full force. He tested Deho, seeing what the human could do. Deho dodged and weaved, using every trick he had learned. He knew he could not win through strength. He had to be smarter. The fight lasted 5 minutes that felt like hours. Deho was covered in bruises. Chiron had barely broken a sweat. But something unexpected happened. Chiron overextended on a strike. His foot caught on uneven ground. He stumbled, falling to one knee. Deho could have pressed his advantage. The rules allowed it. He could have struck while Chiron was down, earned points from the judges. But he did not. Instead, he stepped back and extended his hand to help Chiron up. Not mockingly, genuinely, as one warrior to another. Chiron looked at the offered hand. Then he looked at Deho's face. The human was exhausted, hurt, but his expression showed respect. Not triumph, respect. Chiron took the hand and let Deho help him up. The fight continued, but something had changed. They were not just opponents anymore. When it ended with Chiron's victory, both were declared to have passed. They had both shown what the challenge asked for: honor and mercy. As Elder Thyra announced that Deho had successfully completed all 3 challenges, the arena erupted in a roar that shook the mountains. A human, weak and small by Viscari standards, had passed the trial of echoes, and in doing so, he had changed how the Viscari saw humanity forever. The celebration after the trial lasted 3 days. Deho had never seen anything like it. The Viscari gathered in massive halls carved from stone, sharing food and stories. Warriors who had lived for centuries came to speak with him, to hear about humans and Earth. He was treated not as a curiosity, but as an equal, a warrior who had proven himself. Chiron stayed by his side through most of it, translating when needed and introducing him to important Vescari. They had formed an unlikely friendship, the proud warrior and the small human boy, but they understood each other in ways that surprised them both. They both knew what it meant to push past fear, to face challenges that seemed impossible. Jiwan was happy for her brother, but also busy. She was recording everything, taking notes, learning as much as she could about Viscari society. This was research that no human had ever done before. She knew how valuable this information would be when they returned home. On the 3rd night of celebration, Elder Thyra summoned Deho to the High Council chamber. When he entered, the mood was different, serious. All 13 council members were present, and they were not celebrating. Something had changed. War Master Vorek spoke first. His voice was grave. He said that during the celebration they had received troubling news. The Skrell swarm had been detected moving through the outer territories. They were heading toward the frontier sectors where human colonies existed. Deho did not understand. He asked what the Skrell swarm was. The council members exchanged looks. Then Catherine explained. The Skrell were an insectoid species that operated as a hive mind, millions of individuals acting as one. They moved from world to world, consuming resources and leaving nothing behind. They had destroyed civilizations before. They were one of the greatest threats in the galaxy, and they were heading toward New Haven. Deho felt ice in his stomach. His parents were there, his friends, everyone he cared about except G1. He asked how long they had before the swarm arrived. Elder Thyra said 3 weeks, maybe 4, not long enough to evacuate everyone. War Master Vorek then said something that made Deho angry. He suggested that human colonies were not worth defending. The Viscari military was strong but not unlimited. They had to choose their battles carefully. Saving a few thousand humans from one small colony did not seem strategic when there were larger populations elsewhere that needed protection. Deho wanted to shout at him, but Catherine spoke first. He disagreed with Vorek strongly. The humans had proven themselves. This boy in front of them had proven that humans possessed warrior spirit. How could the Vescari claim to value honor and courage if they abandoned allies who showed those same qualities? The council argued. Some agreed with Vorek. Resources were limited. They had to be practical. Others agreed with Catherine. Honor demanded they help those who had proven worthy. The debate grew heated. Finally, Elder Thyra raised her hand. Everyone fell silent. She looked at Deho and asked him directly, what did he think humans would do if the Viscari chose not to help? Would they evacuate? Would they surrender to the swarm? Deho did not hesitate. He said humans would fight. They would probably die because they were not strong enough to defeat the swarm alone. But they would fight anyway because that was what humans did. They did not surrender their homes without a fight. They never had. That stubbornness was why they had survived on Earth when they should have been eaten by predators. It was why they had spread to other worlds even though space was dangerous. Giving up was not in their nature. The chamber was quiet after he spoke. Then Elder Thyra smiled. She said that was exactly what she thought he would say, and it was exactly why the Viscari would help. She announced her decision. The Viscari would form a military alliance with humanity. They would provide weapons, training, and fleet support. Human colonies would serve as forward defensive positions against the swarm. War Master Vorek protested. This was a huge commitment based on one boy's courage. Elder Thyra cut him off. She said it was based on what that courage represented, a species that refused to yield, that fought even when outmatched, that showed tactical intelligence and adaptability. Those were the qualities of valuable allies. The Viscari would be stronger with humanity as partners, not weaker. The council voted. Not unanimous, but the majority agreed. The alliance was formed. Kethrin was put in charge of coordinating the defense. He would take military advisors and equipment to New Haven immediately. They had 3 weeks to prepare. Deho asked if he could return with them. His people needed to know what was coming. They needed time to prepare, Elder Thyra agreed. She said he had earned the right to fight for his home. As they left the council chamber, Chiron caught up with Deho. The young Viscari warrior said he had volunteered to join the defense force going to New Haven. He wanted to fight alongside humans. He wanted to see if they were as stubborn in battle as Deho was in the trial. The journey back to Cathara 7 was faster than the journey to Vescara Prime. The Vescari ships could move quickly when needed. Deho spent the time learning about the Skrell swarm from Kethrin and the other military officers. What he learned terrified him. The swarm operated like an army of ants. Individual Skrell were not very intelligent, but controlled by the hive mind, they became devastating. They attacked in waves, never stopping, never retreating. They learned from every battle and adapted their tactics. They could not be reasoned with or scared off. They simply consumed and moved on. The Viscari had fought them before. It always resulted in massive casualties even when the Viscari won, but humans had never faced them. New Haven's population had no real military training. They had security officers and hunting weapons. Against millions of Skrell warriors, that would not be enough, unless they learned quickly. Kethrin had a plan. The Viscari would provide plasma weapons, shield generators, and tactical training. They would help fortify the settlement. And most importantly, they would teach the humans Viscari combat techniques. It would not make humans as strong as Viscari, but it would make them more effective fighters. When they arrived at Cathara 7, alarms were already sounding. Not attack alarms, communication alarms. Earth had detected the swarm movement too. They were sending warnings to all frontier colonies. Evacuate if possible. Prepare to defend if not. Governor Minho had called an emergency meeting. When Deho walked into that meeting with Kethrin, Kieran, and 24 Viscari military advisors, the entire room fell silent. Then his mother screamed his name and ran to hug him. His father was right behind her. After the emotional reunion, Kethrin addressed the settlement leadership. He explained the alliance, the threat, and the plan. New Haven would not evacuate. They would stand and fight. The Viscari would help them prepare. But make no mistake, this would be a real war. People would die. But they had a chance to survive if everyone worked together. Haniel stepped forward. His eyes were hard but determined. He said the security forces were ready to fight. They just needed weapons and training. Kethrin nodded. Training would start immediately. Every colonist capable of holding a weapon would learn to use it. The next 3 weeks were a blur of activity. The settlement transformed into a fortress. Vescari engineers worked alongside human construction crews to build defensive walls and shield generators. Weapon caches were established throughout the settlement. Underground bunkers were expanded to protect children and those who could not fight. Deho trained every day with Kieran. The Viscari warrior pushed him hard, teaching him techniques that used speed and agility rather than strength. Kieran said that in the coming battle, Deho's small size would be an advantage. He could move through spaces Skrell warriors could not easily follow. He could be where enemies did not expect. The whole settlement watched the sky, waiting for the moment when the stars would darken with enemy ships, waiting for the battle that would determine if New Haven survived or became another colony, consumed by the swarm. On the 23rd day after Daeho's return, the alarms sounded. Not drills this time. Real alarms. The Skrell swarm had arrived early. Millions of ships filled the sky like a dark cloud. The battle for New Haven was about to begin. The sky above New Haven turned black. Not with night, but with ships. Thousands upon thousands of Skrell vessels descended like a swarm of locusts. They blocked out the sun, casting the settlement in shadow. The sound of their engines was like thunder that never stopped. Daeho stood at his position on the eastern wall, plasma rifle in his hands. Around him, human colonists and Veskari warriors prepared for the attack. Chiron was beside him, checking his weapons one final time. The young Veskari looked at Daeho and said something in his own language. The translator device converted it. He said today they would see what humans were truly made of. Daeho looked around at his neighbors. Farmers, miners, scientists, teachers. 3 weeks ago, most of them had never held a weapon. Now they stood ready to defend their home. He saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. They were scared, but they would not run. That was very human. The first wave hit like a tsunami. Skrell warriors poured from the ships. Insectoid creatures with 6 legs and razor-sharp claws. They moved fast, coordinated by the hive mind. They attacked the shields first, testing the defenses. Plasma fire lit up the battlefield as defenders opened fire. The Veskari warships in orbit engaged the swarm's larger vessels, trying to reduce the number of warriors that could land. Explosions bloomed in space like deadly flowers. But there were too many Skrell ships. For every one destroyed, 10 more took its place. On the ground, the battle was chaos. The Skrell broke through the shields in several places. Hand-to-hand combat erupted along the walls. Daeho fired his rifle until it overheated, then drew the combat blade Kieran had given him. A Skrell warrior leapt at him. He rolled under its claws and struck upward, exactly as Kieran had taught him. The creature fell. Hours passed. The defenders held, but barely. Bodies of both Skrell and defenders littered the battlefield. Medical teams worked frantically to save the wounded. Children huddled in underground bunkers, hearing the battle rage above them. This was not like the stories of heroic war. This was brutal, exhausting, and terrifying. Then disaster struck. The eastern perimeter collapsed. Too many Skrell warriors concentrated their attack on one section, overwhelming the defenders. They poured through the gap, heading straight for the main habitat domes where most of the population lived. If they reached those domes, thousands would die. Hanul rallied every available fighter. He ordered a counterattack to close the gap. Daeho, Chiron, and a mixed unit of humans and Veskari formed the spearhead. They charged into the Skrell warriors, fighting with desperation. They had to hold this position. There was nowhere left to retreat. In the middle of the chaos, Daeho noticed something. The Skrell moved in patterns, responding to commands from the hive mind. But those commands came through some kind of signal, probably from a central ship in orbit, and the signal had to travel through the local environment, which meant it could be disrupted. Cathera 7 had strong magnetic fields in certain areas. The Veskari had mentioned it interfered with their scanning equipment. What if it also interfered with the Skrell hive communication? Daeho grabbed his comm unit and called Jiwan. She was in the command center with the scientists. He explained his idea quickly. Could they use the magnetic fields to disrupt the swarm? Jiwan understood immediately. She started calculating. 2 minutes later, she confirmed it was possible. If they could plant signal disruptors at specific points around the settlement, the magnetic interference would create dead zones where the hive mind could not communicate. The Skrell in those zones would become confused, disorganized, but someone had to plant those disruptors. In the middle of the battlefield, through thousands of Skrell warriors, it was a suicide mission. Daeho volunteered. So did Kieran. Hanil tried to stop them, but Daeho explained there was no other choice. They were small and fast. They had the best chance of getting through. Humans and Veskari working together, using their different strengths. That was the point of the alliance, was it not? Hanil gave the order. Teams of human and Veskari fighters would create diversions. Daeho and Chiron, along with 4 others, would plant the disruptors. The Veskari would provide heavy firepower and draw attention. The humans would use their smaller size to sneak through gaps and reach the target points. It was the craziest plan anyone had ever heard. It was also their only hope. The mission was hell. They ran through a battlefield filled with death. Kieran fought like a demon, protecting Daeho as they moved. The other team members fell one by one, buying time with their lives. But the disruptors were planted 1, 2, 3, 4. When they activated, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Skrell warriors in the affected zones stopped coordinating. They became confused, attacking each other or freezing in place. The hive mind was screaming commands they could not hear. Chaos spread through their ranks. The Vescari fleet in orbit saw the disruption and pressed their advantage. They targeted the swarm's command ships, the ones sending the signals. When those ships started exploding, the hive coordination broke down further. The Skrell were still dangerous individually, but without coordination they were beatable. The tide of battle turned. Defenders pushed back. Skrell warriors began retreating to their ships. The hive mind decided this world was too costly. They withdrew, their ships rising into orbit and then jumping to hyperspace. They left behind thousands of dead and took their wounded with them. The swarm had been defeated. When the last Skrell ship disappeared from the sky, a cheer went up from the defenders. But it was a tired cheer. Victory had cost too much. Nearly 300 humans had died. 200 Vescari warriors fell defending the colony. Medical facilities overflowed with wounded. Parts of the settlement were destroyed. The price of survival was high. Deho sat on the eastern wall, too exhausted to move. Chiron sat beside him, both of them covered in dirt and blood. The Vescari warrior looked at the human boy and spoke. He said that today he had seen something he never expected. Humans fought like they had nothing to lose. They protected each other. They never gave up, even when death seemed certain. Chiron said the Vescari were honored to call humans allies. News of the battle spread across the galaxy quickly. The Skrell swarm defeated. A human colony with Vescari help had driven them back. But more than that, it was a human boy who found the weakness and created the strategy that won the day. Combined with Deho passing the trial of echoes, humanity's reputation transformed overnight. Other alien species took notice. Trade missions arrived at human colonies. Diplomatic channels opened. Humanity was no longer seen as weak newcomers. They were seen as stubborn survivors who punched above their weight class. Dangerous when cornered, clever when challenged, loyal to their allies. The Vescari High Council officially recognized humanity as a warrior species. Elder Thera made a public declaration. She said that humans' proved strength came in many forms. Physical power was one type, but the refusal to surrender, the ability to adapt and think tactically, the willingness to sacrifice for others, these were equally valuable. The Vescari had much to learn from their new human allies. Years passed. New Haven rebuilt stronger than before. Other human colonies established defensive partnerships with the Vescari. Trade flourished. Cultural exchange programs started. Young humans and young Vescari trained together, learning from each other. Deho became a liaison officer between human and Vescari military forces. He was still young, but his experience made him valuable. G1 became one of the leading experts on interspecies cooperation and alien biology. Her research helped both species understand each other better. Chiron commanded a mixed unit called the Unity Battalion, made up of both human and Vescari warriors. They responded to threats across the frontier, protecting colonies of all species. The bond formed in battle at New Haven became legendary. Humans and Vescari, working as one. On the 5th anniversary of the Battle of New Haven, a monument was erected in the main square. It showed a human and a Vescari standing back to back, weapons ready, protecting each other. Carved into the stone base were the names of all who died defending the settlement. Human and Vescari names together, honoring the sacrifice that saved them all. Deho stood before that monument on the anniversary, now 19 years old. He thought about the scared 14-year-old who had faced a thorn wolf because running felt wrong. He thought about all the events that followed from that single moment of refusal to yield. Humans were spreading across the galaxy now, no longer alone. They had allies. They had respect. They had a place among the stars. And it all started because one boy held his ground when a beast attacked. Because he showed the galaxy what humanity truly was. Not the strongest, not the biggest, but absolutely stubbornly, incredibly unwilling to give up. Chiron joined him at the monument. They stood in silence for a moment. Then the Vescari warrior spoke. He said that before meeting humans, the Vescari thought they understood courage. Now they knew they had only understood part of it. Humans taught them that sometimes the bravest thing was to stand your ground when you had every reason to run. Deho smiled. He said humans learned something too. That strength alone was not enough. That honor and wisdom mattered. That the best way to survive in a dangerous universe was not to face it alone, but to find friends who would stand beside you when the darkness came.